Hey guys, it's Drew again. Baseball is a game of numbers. It's made up of statistics that we look at, we study, we debate. Who was the greatest? Who ranks where? Which team was the best of all time? But the truth is all of these numbers, all of these statistics, all of these teams were made up of stories. Stories by men that played the game, that gave it their all, that did it for the love and the passion of the game. And a collection of those stories would just be fantastic. Well, today we're going to talk about a book that you guys are aware of, but still we want to do a little bit deeper dive into one of the best storybooks of all time when it comes to baseball history. Today we're going to be talking about The Glory of Their Times. So let's check it out. I'm going to group you guys watching into one of three categories, and this is kind of the same for anything, but there's a group that, as I tell all these stats or numbers or stories, you've heard it all before. You know this. You've been it. You've done it, and I'm not really telling you anything new, and that's fine. Then there's going to be people who knew some of it or part of it, but didn't know all of it and learned something new. And then there's going to be a few that have never heard any of this before. So it doesn't matter which group you're in. Hopefully you enjoy this. So we're talking about The Glory of Their Times. It's a book that was written well over 50, 60 years ago, actually, by someone named Lawrence Ritter. And what he did was, he wasn't like a deep baseball historian, but he had a deep passion for the history of baseball. And what he did was, he wanted to capture the stories of the men who played at the turn of the centuries. Guys that witnessed people like Ty Cobb or Christy Mathewson, people that played along with Honus Wagner, the people that we revere on the Mount Rushmore of baseball history. These were players that played with them. Some of them were them. I mean, there's Hall of Famers like Goose Goslin in here, or Rube Marquardt, and there's guys you barely know anything about, like maybe Chief Myers or Fred Snodgrass or somebody like that. But there's it's a whole collection of stories, and all it is he found these players, and these guys were old men at the time, and he sat down and he just did a very basic interview. The questions weren't hard hitting and they weren't controversial. It was more like, tell me what it was like at the hotels that you stayed at, or what was it like to travel with the team. I mean, honestly, some of the questions that he asks are almost juvenile in the way he asks. You know, like, well, what do you think about the game today versus the way you played it, or how hard were how hard nosed were the players then versus now, that kind of thing. But what it does is you can hear the passion in the voice as you read the words to these guys, as they start to go back in their mind and they're remembering, oh, I remember this one time we were playing in Cincinnati, which I think is funny when they pronounce it that way. And you can almost hear the tone in their voice, the joy and the love, even though these guys are in their 60s, 70s, or even 80 years old. Guys that were born in the 1800s, and they're talking about this passion from back when they were young in their 20s and 30s playing this game that they loved. Well, this book has been a classic for many years, and so many of us have it. We've read it. We know the stories. We highlight it, and we look at, oh, I love this one where Rube Ressler is talking about this, or Bob O'Farrell is talking about that, and you sort of relive it. But as he went and he did this, in order to capture all this, Ritter took along a tape recorder and he just put it down and he taped these conversations. Well, many, many years later, after this book had been in print many a times for decades, he found these old cassette tapes and decided to release them. And it's the actual original audio of these interviews that he gave with these guys telling these stories that he recaptured in the book. Well, about, I don't know, 15 or 18 years ago, my mother-in-law actually gave me the CD copy of The Glory of Their Times. And it has a number of them. Now, it's not complete. You know, it doesn't have every single interview that's in the book, but it has majority of them. And you actually hear the voices of these guys telling the stories. And this is, you know, all on CDs like the good old days. Well, a quick story about me. I kept this in my truck, and I had it for years, and if I was on a trip or had nothing I wanted to listen to, I'd pop a CD in and I'd listen to it. And it was really kind of cool to hear these old guys talking about the love that they had, talking about, oh, I remember when Ty Cobb came up as a rookie, or I was good friends with Babe Ruth, or boy, that one guy, he was kind of a jerk, or whatever the stories were. I just loved hearing that passion that they had. Well, about, I don't know, 4 months ago, there was an accident where I actually was hit, and I'm fine, everything, but it did total my truck, and I had to move on. Well, I did get a new vehicle, and everything's fine, except I don't have a CD player anymore. In fact, I don't have a CD player anywhere because we've moved on to audio versions of digital files like YouTube and Spotify and all these other things. And I remember as I was clearing out my old truck and I found the CD copy, I thought, I don't know if I'll ever hear this again. It was kind of a sad, weird little thing. And but I found something last week and I thought it was interesting. And this has been out for a while, so maybe you know this and maybe you don't. But I'm going to put a link in the description below. And what it is it's actually a playlist that other YouTubers have made years ago of these audio files. Now, I would recommend that you listen to this. A lot of you guys tell me that, oh, I listen to videos as I'm driving in my car on the way to work, or I'm doing it while I'm doing stuff around the house, or maybe doing lawn work or walking the dog or whatever it is that you may put on a playlist where you don't have to watch the video for what's being seen, but you're listening to the content. This is it. So I'm going to put a link down below of a playlist that somebody else I don't know made. I want you to listen to these things. I want you to listen to them. When you've got 20 minutes, just put them in your saved playlist. 20 minutes or 30 minutes, listen to a thing. Listen the way I listen to this in the truck on a CD player, and just listen, because when I rediscovered the fact that there are these out there and other files besides on CD, I was thrilled. In fact, last week I was outside doing some work and I found out that this is actually the entire CD version, just like this, is on Audible, and which we have Audible. This is not a commercial for Audible, but still, and it was free. So I listened to it as I was outside doing stuff, and I just had that joy come back to me. So this is a kind of an odd video. I'm not really showing anything. It's not a huge discovery as far as like I just found out about this book. But if you've never heard of this book, I suggest you pick up a copy. It has been in print for decades, and you can find them used for practically nothing. If you want, buy the new book. If you're a big reader. If you're not a reader and you've got a CD player, you can find these used probably on eBay and probably not too expensive. But just for the ease of it, click on the link below. Go listen to some of these stories. Listen about how Honus Wagner, cut himself one time, and the entire team circled around him while he dropped his pants, and they all put on tobacco to seal up the cut before he could get some stitches in the middle of the field. Listen to that story. Listen to Chief Myers, who was the catcher for Christy Mathewson. Quote from memory, Casey at the Bat. He was alive when Casey at the Bat was actually written in the 1800s, and he loved this. And as a 70-something-year-old man, he's listening, or actually 80-something when he did it. He's quoting Casey at the Bat. You could hear the joy in his voice. We've all heard that little poem before, but hearing somebody who was kind of in that moment, it's just fantastic. So I encourage you to listen to this stuff. If you don't care about baseball history, if you already know this, I've heard the playlist, I've got the CDs, I know it all, that's fine. Move along. But for those of you who don't know about it, go find out the audio version. Find out who that is, because he interviews him, and everyone knows about Ty Cobb, but he talks about that picture, and it's called the most famous behind in baseball history, and that's Jimmy Austin. And when you hear Jimmy Austin talk about what it was like to play and remember that exact play and describe what it was like, you'll never forget it. So there's my encouragement for you. Go out, find the book, The Glory of Their Times by Lawrence Ritter. Find the CD, find an audio version, find it digitally, but do yourself a favor, enhance and enrich your love and your passion for baseball history as you hear the voices of the men who played the game at the turn of the century, last century, and talking about the joy that they had as young men. I appreciate your time, and until next time, you guys be good.